We are having a very casual little question and answer chat with Tamara Casey, otherwise known as Taz. She is a fellow Substacker. I would say fellow multi hyphenate, professional with really music as a lifelong passion. But I will let Tamara do a little introduction of herself before we start polling questions and just answering them as musicians. So go ahead, Tamara. How would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, if you're here, you can call me Taz. It's a lot easier than the 15 pronunciations of my name. Uh, but yeah, I've been, as David said, a multifaceted professional with music as a main hobby for the last 10 years or so. Do singer-songwriter type compositions primarily, and but love all kinds of music, was a ballroom dancer for, God, almost 15 years. So that definitely expanded my musical repertoire from a listening perspective significantly. So, yeah, kind of don't have a lane as far as genre or style or any of that. Just go wherever the song takes me.
Well, I love that because I was just talking to someone else about this recently. I think it's actually fascinating, especially today, to acknowledge like the realistic way that we incorporate music in our lives. And most of us who are musicians really aren't doing it professionally. We really have it as uh, a foundational thing that we've grown into through other hobbies. Um, I proudly say I'm an amateur, and I think that it's just part of my life. Music is, and I think that's obvious. We've sort of been orbiting one another online for a few months now. I think we have similar outlooks on, um, music is a way to really navigate an emotional connection, healing, something out there that we can't quantify. And whatever the genre is, whether it's folk music, whether it's guitar, whether it's singing, for me, it's just classical. Either way, I'm always trying to strip out like the technical side of it and really trying to make it human. Um, let's answer some questions. And so there's 200 in here, and who knows if it doesn't relate to you, just whatever, we can skip it.
Okay.
Okay, changing tastes. Has your favorite type of music changed dramatically as you've grown older or gone through different life stages?
Uh, I don't know if I'd say it's changed as much as it's expanded. I was obviously I'm a proud hardcore Gen Xer. I grew up heavily influenced by pop and rock music of the 60s and 70s, and I still that's still like a go-to for me. But as I've gotten older, I mean, as I mentioned, dancing massively expanded my musical horizon into more of a world music appreciation, particularly Latin music and Brazilian music,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. And, living in Boston for many years and hanging out with a bunch of kids from Berkeley College of Music probably,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
got me into jazz much more than I would have been otherwise. And I'd say classical for me has kind of always been there, weaving in and out in the background. But, deeper appreciation as I get older and just need to calm the hell down and
Yeah. Well, I
beautiful. That's just instrumental.
I think it's valuable to have like go to 10 options. Like as a classical musician, I don't just listen to classical. So I'm like you. I think pop, jazz, folk, there's a little bit of country. I mean, really good music is good music. If it
Yeah,
speaks to you, it
100%.
speaks to you. So what I and tell me how you think about this too, but I take inspiration from a lot of different genres. So, sure, I'm gonna be releasing an album soon that is exclusively romantic era piano, but that doesn't mean that, like, when I listen to David Bowie, it hasn't informed how I want to maybe explore an imaginative story, right? It doesn't have to be verbal, and it doesn't have to be the same genre for us to use it and, like, access it for whatever you're doing now. How do you feel about that? Like, do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm reminded of a few weeks ago. Brad did a tune tag with Owen McTeague, and really talked heavily about rock music and pop music influenced by classical music, and
Oh,
I can't stop like finding and hearing those songs now. I mean, one of my favorite songs of all time is "Whiter Shade of Pale" by Protocol Harem, and it's just like Bach playing in the background, And I was at a songwriting workshop in
mm,
Nashville, and another song that I love, "A Thousand Years" by Christina Perri. Her and David Hodges were telling the story behind the song at that workshop, and uh, David Hodges was just like, they were hoping to get it placed in a wedding scene. And so he basically was like taking the wedding march and figuring out how to like just turn it around and invert it and all this stuff. And
sure,
when
sure.
you go back in,
Subtly
when it's on
reference
CD,
it.
and yeah, you wouldn't notice, just listening to it on the radio or something. But as soon as you know that, you can't unhear it, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
there's
go,
several of those too. Billy Joel has, some Beethoven references, and there's a couple others that I'm losing, but I know there's Rachmaninoff references, and I love that. I love the callbacks to another time, and I think it stands, it just shows that I think making the music accessible in whatever form, there's value to it. So, you can enjoy Bach, Rachmaninoff, Chopin, whatever through, like, these pop
yeah,
songs, which
definitely.
yeah, like, I would never think that, just thinking, but it's beautiful how it's used, so okay, I'm gonna pull another question.
Okay.
Okay, visualizing the sound. What role does the visual presentation of your instrument or music and your playing space play in supporting whatever mission you're going for in your music?
Well, I mean, I do believe that having a created space, I've posted some pictures in some of my notes about, my home studio, and I see this when I travel and work with friends. Having and you're the master of this with all your twinkling lights.
Thank you,
Um,
thank you.
but you have to have something that inspires you, and for
Yeah,
me, if I hadn't been a technology person, I probably would have been an architect or an interior designer or something. So for me, physical space is very important, and aesthetic is very important. And if you looked around my house, you'd all be like, what the hell's going on with this woman? There's all these styles and art, and but it's all about things I love, right? So I try to blend it all together as best I can, but it's about things I love and then creating, sort of a flow type of space. And so if you look at my studio, it's very eclectic, it's very crazy, some of it's just like there's no place else to put this stuff, so it's going in here. But
yeah, it sounds like
it's all comfortable and cozy and can be rearranged in any way that it needs to be arranged to, support the collaboration process. And, and it's funny, I really go there for collaborations and recording, and but most of the time, I'm sitting over here, at my piano or whatever,
sure, sure.
for composition. And so, um, but having that, having art, having comfortable furniture, soothing colors, all of that, I think, every creative I know has to have, a space that's sort of really tailored to them. And when they don't have that, they struggle. Or, you see
Mm,
a lot of writers will go out, and they want to write in the wild or
sure,
coffee shop
sure.
or in the park or those kinds of things. So I think it is important. It's a multi-sensory thing, right? That you're trying to describe or evoke a feeling for, and that's important.
I love that. Like to me it says kind of setting the stage. You know, there's getting ready for a performance, of course, and getting ready to perform to whatever degree you're going to share your music, but there's also setting the stage so that your own creative process can even get moving. You know, and if not, you know, maybe it's easy to get moving, but everybody has resistance in some form. And so, like, you know, it sounds like your space, you look forward to going there to work in it when the time is right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I kinda I wrote this, I think, in my, sorry for the dog.
Hi, doggy.
I wrote this in my Darcy, stop it. Wrote this in my Christmas, post, but I try to make the whole house sort of that way. I mean, obviously not the whole house, but, living room, dining room, sunroom, studio, these are
Sure.
where I work most often, and I try to have that, peaceful aesthetic in all of those places.
Yeah, and it also makes me think of like what we had just talked about with pulling inspiration from anything else. Like, you know, what we creatively are inspired to do in the moment, it's important to always have maybe not active sources of it, but just passive. So if you've already arranged your space to be like conducive to your inspiration and creativity, then it can't hurt. It certainly can't hurt. So I love that. Okay, pulling another. All right, music and physical health. Have you ever used music to help with a physical challenge in yourself or another person? Like managing pain, encouraging workout, etcetera.
Uh, I don't know that I've ever done it, um, consciously for that purpose, but, uh, obviously, when you dance for as long as I did, you sort of,
Mm,
develop a very, specific kind of connection to, uh, health and physical fitness,
sure.
accompanied by that. And then, when I've taken myself, like, off in the woods for writing retreats or meditation things, or, things like that, and, when you're really in a deep sort of, reflective period, for me, that's better when sort of accompanied by a soundtrack, if you will, and I think there's I don't know if it's healing as much as calming and soothing, or, listening to things that are helping you specifically try and get in touch with emotions you're either trying to let go of or tap into for some kind of inspiration or movement forward.
Sure. Well, I think it's so funny, like, I'm always trying to, like, link with what we talked about before, but that reminds me of, like, setting the stage for your inspiration. Really, what that sounds like to me, you use it more passively as a way to, hopefully set the stage for reflection, which I think I would argue helps physical health and helps
Yeah.
recovery of anything. And so, you know, I like to kind of describe music as it's not, I mean, I say music is medicine, but I think what I really mean is it puts you in the place where your body can heal because
Yeah.
I think calmness allows for healing, whether it's emotional, physical, whatever. So,
And
um,
that's one of the things I love about, the posts you do where you just put, up a 3 or 4 minute piece or something. It's stress management, right?
sure.
And
Yeah.
we can bring the stress down, then that helps with all the things you were just talking about.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, last part I'll say about this before we go to the next question is, I think when we remember that music at its core, when we share it, needs to be like almost music as a service to another person, I think it changes the dynamic than when I see a lot of creators, and I don't see you do this, but I see a lot of creators make the mistake of, I think, having a very ego, self-forward image, and, like, their music is all about them, and I think that's a mistake because I think, like, the posts I've seen from you with music, your music, at least the stuff I've heard, always has, I don't wanna say folk music because I think that maybe gets a bad rap, but I think it has a message that I is inspiring, and I think helps you move into whatever action, you might be inspired to move in. Whereas I don't think a lot of music does that when a lot of people sharing today. Um, anyway, so I just think there's a value to remembering music as a medicine or a form to get
Yeah.
there.
There was a really good post that I restacked this morning from, I might be butchering or misremembering the name, but I think it's Micah Rico. And it talked about the importance of remembering that, when you're asking someone to listen to a song, you're asking them for time, and that's the only
Mm.
get back.
It's an act of
So it
trust.
it has to be a gift,
Yeah,
and it was
yeah.
a really beautiful post, and I really liked the way that he, described that sentiment. It really
I
resonated with
love that. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah,
if you look for that, I think you'd enjoy it. It really struck a chord.
no pun intended. Alright, let's pull another. Let's pull another, and if I don't like it, I'll throw it back. Okay, if you had to summarize your entire artistic philosophy in one sentence, okay, this is kinda hard. If you had to summarize your entire artistic philosophy in one sentence, what would it be? Go, and you have 10 seconds. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my god.
That's hard.
That's really hard, especially for someone as, genre eccentric as
I was
me.
gonna say diverse with the
Uh,
genres, yeah.
uh,
Your
well,
entire artistic philosophy.
tying back to what you said, um, I talk about what's important to me, not necessarily, about me, but
Mhm.
what's important to me, and, uh, and I would say, um, you know, trying to do that while, being very unconstrained,
Okay.
so I think that I don't think I'm genre crazy because I'm genre crazy. I think I'm genre crazy because I kinda go where the lyric or the melody or is calling and, that's
Sure.
what it is, and I mean, sometimes we'll sit down and write something very intentionally, but one of my favorite experiences was, one of my good friends, Paulo, and I were working, doing a long weekend co-write session, and he started playing something on the guitar, and I looked at him and I said, "That's not for the guitar, that's for the piano. Can you go over to the piano and start playing that?" And he started playing it, and it for whatever reason, the chords just really reminded me of,
Mm,
Edith Piaf, and
okay.
and I said, "We have to write this song in French," and he said, "Do you speak French?" And I said, "Well, a long time ago, once upon a time,
Let's
I was
learn.
conversant and, something," but I just said it's, you know, uh, m like, "Bon voyage, bonne chance" was this phrase that came to me,
Mm,
and,
mhm.
and it turns out he lived in St. Bart's for a couple of years, so he spoke poor French. I, was, like, trying to drag this up from, like, high school, remembering but we wrote this song that was just this beautiful song, and between our pidgin French and Google Translate or whatever, and wherever the chord structure was taking us,
Sure, sure.
and it ended up being a very sweet song about uh, a parent like sending their child off into the world, right? This is not an
Mm,
experience I have ever had. I don't have children of my own, and
mhm.
so, it's not always, like, this is what I mean, it's like, it doesn't have to be about me, it's like,
Yeah,
what's the message, right? And so
yeah,
to your
yeah.
point, I think, people will figure things out about you by the things you think are important, but you don't have to make it about yourself, it can be about the message you're trying to deliver more so.
Yeah, it's like the universal story of me
Right,
in that sense, and what I hear too is like a flexibility and then also a excitement when the idea emerges. So, I think when we pigeonhole ourselves into something, it is very restraining in that, okay, well, I'm doing this on the guitar, so it has to live there,
right,
right?
right,
And I think you're saying, the opposite, which is actually, I love that. What if,
right, yeah,
and on we go with, wherever the inspiration takes you. And yeah, in the same way, it's like, okay, well, you don't know French, but you can learn the phrases you need to get the message you needed. That
yeah,
lyrically you wanted it to not be English for some reason, right? So, it's like, okay, well, if so, then we have to figure out a way to do that.
right.
And it reminds me too, you had written something recently about, and maybe it was an interview that I read, and your response was about how you look at music and all of these other projects you do kind of as a puzzle.
Yeah.
Um, could you maybe, like, just touch on that a little bit? Because I loved that idea, and I myself, have said that before, so I would love to hear how you describe that.
Yeah, I think, as you know, songs rarely come sort of, fully flowing out of the ether. I mean, when they do, it's wonderful, but that's not the typical experience, right? And the craft part of it is that problem solving of I mean, let's just talk about the French song because I think it's a good example.
Yep.
Right, I heard this chord structure, it's like, has to be in French, okay. The saying, "Bon voyage et bonne chance," it was like, you know, safe trip and good luck, right? And
Mhm.
so then it's like, well, who would be saying that to somebody and why, right? So then you have
Right,
to
yeah, yeah.
craft the whole backstory from that, right? And then this idea about like a parent sending their kid off to college, or to travel to Europe for the first time or something, then, okay, now I got this backstory, right? And then I can think about, okay, well, now it's like, what are the emotions that need to go with this? And then you're trying to do it,
Mm, mm.
trying to do it in another language. And, so,
Sure.
that's an example of really dealing with all that. Now, I will say, writing in another language kind of took some of the pressure off because the rhyming typically when you're writing in something other than English is a little different and not quite as
Mm,
critical.
yeah.
But when you're trying to really get um the emotion, the exact right lyric, and then having the constraint of rhyming along with that, you're kind of constantly iterating. It's like trying the
Mm, yeah.
jigsaw puzzle pieces, right? You're it's like, does that one work? No. Okay, we'll go to this
Plug
source.
this in. Nope, not quite.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
I
and
love
then
that.
the whole melodic element. I have a lot of songs, for example, that I haven't finished because I maybe got the melody to a point where I could craft the lyric into what I wanted, but then realized, yeah, and that's not a good enough melody for that song, right? And
Mm,
so now, like, now what can I go back and do to play with it? And do I change the time signature to something? Do I thought of this as more staccato? Does it need to be more legato? Those kind,
sure.
treatments, are important, and so, just all those little subtle things, dynamics and they all make a big difference, and so puzzling through all of that, I don't know what else to call it other than, it's a very specific kind of problem
Sure.
solving.
Yeah, I no, I love that. I think experimentation, plug and play, and again, it goes back to the flexibility of it. You sort of have to be willing to objectively, well, try whatever that comes to mind with an open mind, but then also afterward objectively be like, doesn't work.
Yeah,
Next idea. You gotta be open to that because if not, you kinda just are putting out something that's uninspired, really, because if you're not asking that question, like, is is it, uh is this how it needs to be in its final form? Then you kinda miss the puzzle aspect of it.
right, yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. Okay, let's do another. I don't like that one. Some of these are too piano specific, so I don't wanna cast us into that. Okay, okay, this is a good one. This is a good one. Musical mood shift. What specific type of music do you reach for when you need a really powerful shift in your mood? Like if I were to ask you today, and I know it probably shifts and evolves over time, but today, what would that music be? Whether it's a genre or specific artist or CD even.
Uh, I mean, obviously it depends, but I'd say the number one thing I go to when I just need to, like, go someplace else mentally, is, like, old school British R&B and funk music.
Really? I would never have guessed that. I love that.
Yeah, I and, I mean, American R&B too, but there's something about, like, British R&B from the '80s and '90s that, I really like, but yeah, funk, like,
Mhm,
it's hard
mhm.
to beat, good funk music and good, really
Yeah.
good, uh, R&B to just change your mood.
Yeah, there's an energy to it, and, I love that you have a geographic specific too, because you're right in that, like, the way vowels move around, it is different, per, your dialect. It changes how like you said, even the rhyme scheme of, like, French, like, the reason it's so different is not just because it's a new language, but it's spoken and said, it moves around the mouth a little different, so I love that. I really love that. And I don't know if I have a specific. I mean, uh, I jump around between jazz, lo-fi, which is a form of jazz. Um, I'll listen to Kesha, I'll listen to
Mhm.
Ani DeFranco. I mean, there's so many random, it's like whatever the mood is asking for, you have to listen
Yeah,
and choose the right one. You just plug it in and then, you got an hour out of your head. Sometimes I use music as an escape. So, like if you're in a bad mood, use funk, British R&B to get out of the bad mood. Sometimes I use it as a let's go deeper into it, so like
absolutely.
the sad music, let's maybe have a tearjerk, let's just cry a little bit, plug in a sad CD. Um Okay, awesome. Let's do another. Okay, okay. This is gonna get more into the minutia of the business,
Okay.
the world of music today. Okay, the inclusivity challenge. Beyond ticket prices, what do you think is the single biggest barrier to entry for a new listener or player, whichever one? And what is one tangible thing that we as artists can do to lower that barrier?
Hmm. I think, one of the things that, uh, has been on my mind lately and I don't get the sense this is necessarily as big a problem in the rest of the world as it is here in the US.
Mhm.
But I feel like the loss of small venues, was
Mm.
already happening, and then obviously COVID, really took a toll on a lot of these businesses.
Oh, totally.
But I think the loss of places for live music and the loss of appreciation for live music,
Mm, mhm.
is is a big issue for me, and
Yeah, that's a good one.
as I get older, I have no interest in going and seeing anybody in a stadium. I'm
Yeah,
100% small venue, clubs, like I small theaters. I don't, I wanna go where the acoustics are good, right? If I'm gonna go for that
sure.
live experience, I wanna be able to, fully, appreciate it. So I think that's one thing, and I think as artists supporting each other, promoting each other's work, collaboration, I think that's the best. I don't think there's I don't know what else we can do to, rage against the machine except take care of each
Yeah.
other, you know?
Yeah, I love that, and I totally agree with you. I think the loss of in my mind, it's almost like, everything is so hyper commercialized as well, like, in
Yeah,
conjunction with that, that, like, uh, really you're not getting the venue unless there's an economic reason for the business to have you.
yeah,
And again, this is coming from, like, classical music, so I don't really know a lot of these other economies and whatnot, but, um, uh, yeah, I would have to agree it's the same for piano. I think all I see now is really small. Like, for somebody like me, it would be like a hotel gig or something
yeah.
like that, which is great, but it's like, is that really the audience? Is that the audience I want? Do I want it to be ambient, you know?
Yeah, I think I don't know, I remember when I was young, uh, I don't know if they still do this, probably not, or maybe not as often, but, Nordstrom's when I was a kid, they always
Hmm.
had someone playing the piano in the
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and I thought that was just, I mean, it was their gimmick, right, or their shtick, but
Sure.
I thought, what an amazing thing, that's employing, 2
Yeah,
pianists a day or whatever, and, so I thought that, things like that, a hotel gig like you're saying or something like that, I think they're still important, I
I agree, yeah.
but to your point about building an audience, not necessarily, but,
Sure.
uh, to getting people to appreciate and be reminded of how much live music can mean to them, I
Yep.
in that regard, it's almost like a public service.
Yeah, I agree, and I love what you said too about, like, I think the only remedy we have, because we can't fight this massive machine and industry really, is just to share, collaborate, openly, and be supportive. I see a lot of, like, very, very harsh criticism, especially in the classical music world, and I just don't see the point. It's like,
Yeah,
just
nobody cares, right?
no,
Like,
no.
unless, you're a, championship winning whatever, like,
Yeah,
nobody
yeah.
cares,
Agreed.
people like the little imperfections,
Yep.
they laugh along with you when you forget a lyric and start over or whatever,
Yes, people
part
love
of
that.
the experience, yeah.
I totally agree, and instead of pulling a question, because we need to wrap up, I'll do one question because I had one kind of locked in the chamber, and I think this is a perfect moment to describe it, because we're talking about imperfection and being okay, with sharing that, and people do love it. I think listeners love it. Um, my question to you is, how do you think recently Bandcamp in the last week came out and is not allowing AI on this independent music sharing platform, which I think is excellent. how do you perceive moving forward and navigating with sharing our music, even in the different genres we're in, knowing that AI is so prevalent, and that not just the music generation AI, but also the, like, discovery tool for individuals to discover one of us, is heavily AI influenced. So, how do you see yourself navigating music you'd like to share moving forward, knowing about the AI, infiltration?
Oh, that's a doozy.
And you have 10 seconds. I was just kidding.
So I do think that, I mean, let me be clear. I can't stand this stuff. I mean, I just like scientific research, whatever. I mean, there are areas where I'm sure it's going to be incredibly helpful to people, but
Sure.
to come for the graphics people and the artists and the musicians and the whatever, it's like, Jesus, aren't we under enough of an assault already? Now we need to deal with this. Like, I have no patience for it.
Yeah.
Um, the For me, I I love seeing the backlash. I love seeing companies take responsibility like Bandcamp, you know, YouTube, as much as they have their problems, they were one of the first ones to say, "We're demonetizing this, like, you're not
Mm,
making off of us for stuff that you didn't put any effort into," and, so I
yeah.
think they're trying, but I think the technology is outpacing the, self-regulation. I've given up any hope that the government will get its act together on what needs to be done here from a regulatory perspective.
Yep, yep.
I do think that, um, there are, a variety of different music, whether it's your performing rights organization or, National Songwriters Association, there's all these different, sort of associations that represent us as musicians and songwriters in different ways. I think they have a responsibility and we have a responsibility to make sure that they know we're hacked off about all of this. Um,
Yeah.
as far as and just speaking out about it and being honest about it, in terms of what it's doing to people. But I do think that, what gives me a lot of hope is, seeing, it's primarily like Gen Z types or whatever, but this whole analog backlash, people
Mm,
going to back to vinyl, back to
yeah.
Polaroid cameras, back to cassettes and CDs. But, so people are going back to physical media. I think
Intentional listening.
Yeah, I think that's all positive that a live venue thing plays into that part of the conversation,
Yeah.
and I think that, for for us as, composers or artists or what have you, that we've got to, I do feel like it throws down a gauntlet to us, right? In the sense that it's like, and maybe this is just my perverse nature. I mean, I just wrote something called Salty, right? So
Yeah, I saw that, I saw that.
I'm gonna be salty now and say,
Please do.
it just makes me wanna be like, "Fuck you" to the machine, right?
Yeah.
And I want to figure out how to elevate, the quality, and I hate this word, but I don't know what else to say, authenticity of what I'm doing
Mhm.
that is
Yep.
like no machine is gonna come up with that, right? So I
Yeah.
do think it represents, an existential challenge, but, it's another one of those puzzles we have to solve, right? And I think
Totally.
it's a it's a reminder to not be complacent and to bring that, personal aspect, whether it's experience or storytelling ability or musical composition skill or whatever, to think about these things in new and reimagined ways that maybe we wouldn't have if we didn't feel that threat.
Mm. I love that, and just to add, because I agree with everything you've said, to add on, I think yeah, I think it's an existential challenge for artists to just say, "Hey, because this is happening, then how are you going to make it so compelling to how are you gonna make your project so deeply personal, inspired, pulling from something that cannot be replicated by anybody else?
Right.
When I think of classical piano, I think, okay, well, yes, these AI tools can recreate. I mean, from the patterns that have been written, it can recreate very well. But what it can't do is be inspired on the spot to make a change,
Yep.
um, have a story with it that means something, like, really means something, not like BS summaries of 400 other stories that it's being
Right.
trained on, but instead making a claim to, like, hey, this is my story and I am willing to share it, being vulnerable, and yes, it's imperfect. And I think with those elements, uh, the real humans will find it somehow. Um, but that's just the hope in me that thinks uh, the person who needs it will find it when it's needed. Um, Otherwise, there isn't much we can do beyond being creative and sharing. I mean, what are we supposed to do? Fight mega billion-dollar companies that are pre-bubble? We can't. So I think being human is the answer. And the unfortunate side effect is I think discoverability is harder for a listener to discover, another musician navigating the AI world. I think it is harder for people on average to find um, another story they're inspired by. They might find a playlist that's compiled by AI, right? But that doesn't mean that that playlist is going to include more than one of your songs. You know what I mean? So I think that I hope, and I think Bandcamp has started that process of, like, if we call out AI artists, um, perhaps the featured humans will be served at the right moment.
Right.
I hope that's how it ends up. Any final words as we wrap up this lovely chat, Taz?
No, I mean, this has been fun, David. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
It's been a great conversation, and yeah, I think the other way to combat all this AI nonsense and algorithmic nonsense is, kind of comes back to that thing about sharing again, right? And that's one of the things I've loved about Substack so much is, um, it takes a lot to motivate me to listen to new things. I will confess to becoming fussy in my old age, but really seeing how thoughtfully people are curating things and writing about music and particularly emphasizing new music.
Mm, mhm.
I have discovered a lot of new stuff and I'm appreciative of that. And I think that, I think that kind of human interaction, human curation, the resurgence of sort of these college radio stations and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
um, I mean, I'm, to what a fossil I am, I still like listening to Sirius XM just because, they'll have some curation still on the channels, and so I feel like they're hopefully that swing back to all things retro might swing back into those kinds of, better curated experiences as well.
Yeah, I have hope for it. I do. I think we're all craving it. So the natural progression is more people will crave that. And the only solution is companies will start to follow along with what people want. So it's a cycle. And I think we are returning, like you said, to, having a relic, having a intentional listening experience with trusted curators and that maybe opens us up to being like, "Hey, I am willing to listen to this new thing. I trust this person, this curator, and, let's give it a go."
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Alright, well, this has been a pleasure, Taz. For anybody, just tuning in, sorry, we're leaving. This is Tamara Casey, otherwise known as Taz, on Substack. This is her website, Rare Groove Productions. You can find her here on Substack. We'll do this more over the next couple months. These random Q&As, just me alone, me with other artists. So, Taz, thank you again for joining me. This was really fun.
Thank you so much for inviting me, David. I really enjoyed it.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.